beautiful children. I'm so pleased to see you again in my mind's eye. This parsha is Parshat Vayiggash, and guess what? It's very naughty. I can't find my laminate. So I only have one giant laminate to show you about this week's parsha. So this parsha is going to be a bit shorter in time, I think, but I'm going to tell you as many stories as I can about the parsha and hope you won't be too bored. All right, got my t-shirt on. Are you ready? Rolling back the time, and one more, rolling back the time, and one more, rolling back the time, and thinking and thinking and thinking. I'm also very excited because a little boy is going to do the back page of my Siddur handout, and once I get that, I'm going to be able to do another tefillah, revised tefillah of shacharit, what I would usually do in my children's service. But guess what, children? You can do it at home if you're not at school, and you can enjoy it, and even grown-ups can enjoy it because it's got transliteration. It's got how the Hebrew, you pronounce it in English. But of course, children are learning Hebrew. They don't usually use the transliteration, but it's useful for everyone, and it's got a bit of poetry and some translation, so hopefully, and lots of funny pictures, so hopefully it'll be great. Right, this is the laminate for this week's parsha. What is going on? Well, there's lots I've got to tell you in this week's parsha. Do you remember what happened in last week's parsha? We're faced with the cup in Binyamin's sack, Joseph's divining cup. Obviously, Joseph wasn't divining or guessing anything because he knew his brothers, but he pretended that this was a magic cup. And he then asked SPS, some people say, Kie, also known as Medrash Menashe, to go and put the cup in Binyamin's sack. All the brothers are hurled back. What's going to happen? What's going to be? Okay, Yehuda steps forward. This week's parsha, children, teaches us two very, very important lessons. Lesson numero uno, lesson number one, forgive. Lesson number two, do not take revenge. We are not allowed to pay back someone for being nasty. Let's say your brother or sister took something from you and they didn't give it back, and you asked them to give it back, and you could get really cross. I'm going to speak to them all day. You can tell them that you're disappointed. Teachers do that, mummies and daddies do that, I do that. You can tell someone you are disappointed with their behavior. But taking revenge on them and not forgiving them is counterproductive. It's not helpful. And we're going to see how amazing Joseph is after everything he's suffered at the hands of his brothers. He willingly and readily agrees, happy to forgive them, and more than that, tells them it's not your fault. Hashem actually planned this. It's worked out for the best. So Yehuda stands in front of Joseph, thinking Joseph is Sofnas Paneach and not Joseph, his brother, and says, I'm not saying it word for word, but he says, listen, I promised Binyamin's safety. Binyamin is one of only two brothers. His elder brother is lost. Interestingly, SPS, Yehuda doesn't say he's definitely dead in case Sofnas Paneach, who is really Yosef, Sofnas Paneach would say, okay, go bring him. So he doesn't say that. He said the other older brother is lost. Our father has lost his wife, whom he loved very much, Rachel, who was the mummy of Binyamin. Please don't do this. Take me instead. I'm stronger, I'm better. Just have me as a servant instead. Let Binyamin go. Please, I'm begging you, because our father is an old man. He will not be able to cope with the grief of losing Binyamin. It's bad enough he's lost Joseph. Our father will pine away. At this point, because Yehuda clearly has done teshuvah, and he says, I've promised Binyamin's safety, please don't do this. So Yosef realizes, yes, they are sorry for what they've done. And yes, they want to make amends, and they don't want my father to suffer. And my father clearly is alive. And they've said, have pity on my father. So Yosef is feeling very emotional. Sometimes when people say things to you and it is true or it's very special, it makes you feel very sort of warm and funny and fuzzy inside, and then you want to cry. Even because you're happy, you want to cry. Sometimes you want to cry because you're not happy, but sometimes grown-up people also have tears of joy because they're so happy. So Joseph says, Egyptians out, all of my servants, all of my household out. And he is left in front of the brothers, and he can't control himself anymore. And he says, I am your brother, Joseph, it's me. Now the brothers are in shock. They're in shock because they really didn't expect it to be Joseph. They are in shock because then they think, oh my goodness, he's going to punish us. Look what we did. We sold him. He's going to punish us. But Joseph says to them, look, don't worry. This had to happen so that you would come down to Egypt and I could save you in the time of the famine. Now, there's a whole other story about Egypt, which isn't so nice, which we will come to. But Joseph is basically saying, Hashem knows best. This had to happen. Please don't punish yourself. Don't feel bad. It's Hashem's will that you would come here. Now, once the Egyptians see Joseph's family, they're actually quite happy because Joseph comes from a noble family. So that's quite nice. And Pharaoh as well is extremely happy that Joseph comes from such a nice family. And more than that, he says, well, obviously you need to load all the donkeys with grain and presents and go and get your father. Tell everybody to come and move to Egypt where we have lots of food, because thanks to Joseph, Joseph was taking all the Egyptians' money to give them grain. When they ran out of money, he took their animals. When they ran out of animals, he took their land. When they ran out of the land, he took part of the produce, a fifth of it. So, and Joseph never took a penny from this great treasury from the Egyptian people. He gave it all to King Pharaoh. He didn't take anything back for himself. And Pharaoh realized he had a real gem. We know that Yosef was a tzaddik, but for Pharaoh, he was a real gem. He was a really good viceroy. So everybody's donkey gets filled with grain. All the brothers get new garments and presents. SPS, some people say, aka also known as the Medrash, that the brothers, why did they all have to get presents? Was it Brent Cross? Was it, I don't know, what's the other one? Shepherd's Bush sort of, big shopping ground? Was it Camden Town? Why did they all have to have presents? Was it Amazon? Did they get it online? No. They say that the brothers were so distraught when Binyamin had his cup, Joseph's, he thought Safnas Paner's cup, in the bag of grain on Binyamin's donkey, that they all ripped their garments as a sign of mourning, not morning, afternoon, evening, mourning when you're grieving someone who's died, because it was a sign of terrible stress and grief. They ripped their clothes because they were petrified that they were about to lose their brother. And so therefore Joseph reimburses them and gives them all new clothes. But he gives Binyamin 5 sets of clothes, and he gives Binyamin 300 silver pieces. So the donkeys are loaded with delicious food for his father. And now, how are they, okay, before we get to how are they going to tell Yaakov that Yosef is still alive, Yaakov is 130 years old. Now, of course, in those days they lived older, but it's still pretty old. How are they going to break the news to him? But also, how did they know 100% that it was Joseph? So, SPS, some people say, aka also known as the Medrash and Rabbanim, they explain. So Rashi explains 2 different reasons. A, he said, look, I've had a Brit Milah, I've been circumcised, only the Hebrews are circumcised, so I'm definitely your brother. And number 2, look, אני מדבר בעברית. אתם מבינים אותי? אתם רואים שאני גם ישראלי כמוכם? I'm speaking in Hebrew, just like you. Can you see? See, you wouldn't be able to do that if you weren't a Hebrew. I am your brother. And the Rambam says, I'm the Joseph you sold to the Egyptians. only the brothers know who they sold Joseph to, because only the brothers were there when the Ishmaelim came, the Midianim took him out of the pit. They must have known. Where were these caravans? Instead of having kerosene and tar, they had beautiful balsam and lotus. Do you remember in that parsha I explained? Might be nice going with a whole load of cookies, lotus cookies. Not that you'd want to be sold into be a servant for someone, but maybe it was better than smelling horrible tar in the caravan. So only the brothers would know the final destination for Joseph. So how are they going to break it to their father that Joseph is alive? First of all, they have to annul their vow. The brothers had obviously promised never to speak about it, and Joseph had always respected, in a way, what had gone on with the brothers. He never sent word to his father. So that's an interesting one. So this vow is now broken. And so therefore Jacob needs to be told. So there are different SPS, different some people say. Some people say that actually it was Serach, it was Asher's granddaughter, who played the harp very beautifully, just like this girl that I know that had been bat mitzvah. She plays the harp very beautifully. That she played the harp gently and in a beautiful voice said, "My uncle Joseph is alive and he's a ruler in Egypt." And Jacob says, "That's a lovely song you're singing. How nice that song is." But eventually she breaks it to him gently, and the brothers explain to him, "It's true, your son is alive." Some people say that Naphtali, who was a very fast runner, he went ahead to clear the way and to tell Jacob, "Jacob, your son is alive." What does Jacob do first? This is so interesting. What do we do when something very good happens? Do we get excited? Do we say, for example, if we did well in a test, it's because I learnt very hard? And of course, you should learn very hard for tests. And it is important, and you should congratulate yourself when you do something well. Or, maybe if I like to do my videos and I like to do my poems and I like to do my images and all the things that I do. But I can only do that because Hashem has given me the gift of being able to do that for you. So we always have to, at Tzaddik, a righteous person, when something good happens to him, he says, Baruch Hashem, thank God. Okay? Just when something wonderful happens to you, remember who we need to thank. Of course, we should congratulate ourselves on our efforts and positive reinforcement, is absolutely vital. We have to feel good about ourselves. Very important. But we also need to realize that Hashem is in charge of everything. So Yaakov goes to Beersheba. He goes to that special place, Beersheba. He goes to build a Mizbeach, an altar, and he goes to give presents to Hashem, korbanot. And he asks Hashem, "Can I go down to Egypt? Because I know that our homeland is here in Canaan, Israel. May I leave?" Hashem obviously says yes, and Yehuda is sent to go ahead, prepare Egypt for them, make sure there's a Bet HaMidrash, a place of learning where the family can learn Torah. And there are 70 souls go down to Egypt. Yocheved, Moshe's mummy, being SPS, some people say, okay, the Midrash, the last person to be born on the way in. Okay, but Yaakov, when he's going to meet Joseph is getting ready as well. He fires up his chariot and he can't wait to see his daddy. But what does Yaakov do? Yaakov finishes, some people say, okay, as the Midrash, he finishes his Shema before he reciprocates, that Yosef actually falls on his neck first and cries, but that Yaakov, as much as he is 130 years old and he has taken 22 years mourning the loss of his son, he still davens first. He still thanks Hashem. And this is where we learn the right points of what we should do, that we need to give thanks to Hashem, to God, for everything that we are given. And we need to show gratitude. And then Yaakov meets Pharaoh. Yaakov meets Paro. And again, not word for word, but Paro sort of says, "How old are you?" Now, of course, 130 is very old, but in those days, maybe they could live that long. But Yaakov doesn't look great. Let's have a recap. Why does Yaakov not look great? Well, A, Yaakov had to run away from Esau. B, Lavan had cheated him. C, Lavan had chased after him when he left. D, Yaakov still had to face Esav before he could F, go home. But then when he was home, G, Dinah went off by herself without permission and they had to bring her back again. So it was a lot of suffering. And then H, he lost Yosef. So it's been a very hard life for Yaakov, even with all his wealth and his beautiful children, all the wonderful things Hashem had given him. But Yaakov also suffers. And what does Yaakov say to King Pharaoh? He says, yes, I've had a troubled life, but he also blesses Pharaoh. This is a tzaddik. When a tzaddik blesses someone, good things happen. And some people say, he said, may the Nile River overflow so that the land will produce crops again. Some people say that happened, that 2 years into the famine, the Nile River did overflow, so the famine was technically over. Okay. So that's all the things that we've learnt. So if you wanted to buy eggs, you'd have to go to a shop that sells eggs. You wouldn't go to a stationery shop because that sells paper and pens. You wouldn't go to a hardware store where maybe that sells irons and kettles. And you wouldn't go to a clothes shop because that would sell clothes. You'd have to go to the right shop to buy eggs. And what's that got to do with this week's Parsha? Well, Yaakov has his priorities right. He davens to Hashem. He asks permission to go to Egypt. And he says the Shema when he's greeting his long lost son, whom he must miss terribly. He must miss terribly. So those are the lessons of this week's Parsha. So now I can read the story. Judah approaches Joseph and begs him to free Benjamin. He even offers himself as a slave. Yes, he offers to stay in Egypt as Joseph's servant instead of Benjamin, as long as Benjamin is set free and allowed to return to his father's home in Canaan. At this point, when Joseph sees how much his brothers care about one another and their father and Benjamin, he can no longer hold back his feelings. He sends all his servants and guards out of the room, and when he and his brothers are alone, he cries and says, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? The brothers are silent. They're shocked and terrified. Is this man, the second to most powerful man in all of Egypt, really their brother? And so Joseph begs them to come closer and repeats himself, I am Joseph. The brothers finally realize that it's true. This is their brother, but they are so ashamed at what they have done to him that they sold him into slavery. But Joseph comforts them and makes them feel comfortable, telling them that it was God's will that he end up in Egypt so that he would become powerful and have a chance to save the entire family from the terrible famine which was still going on at that time. If we think about Purim and Esther, she was also put into a situation where she marries King Ahasuerus and Mordechai tells her, maybe for this, you were put into such a position to become so important in Persia. And if you don't save the Bnei Israel, then the saving will come from another place. Joseph then sends his brothers home to tell Jacob that he is alive, as well as to invite him to come to Egypt, where he will be able to live in peace for the time being. Pharaoh sends along carriages to help Jacob move. When Jacob sees the wagons and hears the good news, he is overjoyed and stops the long 22 years of mourning for his beloved son Joseph. Jacob travels to Egypt together with his entire family. Exactly how many? Do you remember how many people? 70 people. The 70th is born as they enter the city gates. The newborn is Yocheved, mother of Moshe. On his way to Egypt, God promises Jacob that he will make Jacob's children into a great nation and that he will take them out of Egypt. Joseph goes out to meet his father as he gets closer to Egypt. And when they meet, Joseph hugs and kisses Jacob, which is where Jacob and his family will live. Where will they live? They will live in a place called Goshen. Goshen is a place where it's safe for them to live. through the next generations, because Goshen is a place that has lots of pasture for sheep. And sheep are like a god for the Egyptians, and so therefore they cannot be in close proximity with shepherds. And Jacob and his family, obviously, they're shepherds, they've got lots of flocks. Listen to your mummy and daddies and do what they say. Listen to your mummies and daddies and don't forget to pray. Listen to your mummies and daddies, the rabbis lead the way. Then they will be happy. It's going to take longer for me to see you, but I hope to see you. Be well, stay safe. Don't worry. Bye.